Welcome back everyone to Nested TV. I'm Sean once again here to tell you a little bit about compassion fatigue and how to manage that through self-care and self-love. So what is compassion fatigue? Compassion fatigue is a term coined by Charles Figley to describe a process of developing secondary traumatic stress. It is a state of tension and preoccupation with the traumatized persons by re-experiencing the traumatic events, avoidance or numbing of reminders, and persistent arousal such as anxiety associated with that particular individual. Okay, so what is secondary traumatic stress? It's another term coined by Figley defined as a natural consequence resulting from knowing about a traumatizing event experienced by a significant other. The stress resulting from helping or wanting to help the traumatized or suffering person and being empathetically engaged with the traumatized person. It's very commonly experienced by healthcare workers, emergency response workers, and mental health care workers, but make no mistake, anyone can experience secondary traumatic stress disorder and compassion fatigue. Okay, so let's talk about stress. Stress is not just something you go through. Stress is actually a physiological experience for your whole body. It shifts your nervous system, changes your breathing, and changes how you actually perceive the environment around you. But that doesn't mean stress is a bad thing. It has allowed you to evolve and adapt. The problem is when stress becomes chronic and there's no period for the body to recover. That's when our strategies for dealing with and preventing compassion fatigue comes in. Strategies for dealing with and preventing compassion fatigue. So what are self-care and self-love? My personal experiences have brought me to define these two as very, very different things. Self-care is more like maintenance. I'll be honest, it's work and it's usually not fun, but the benefits are well worth it. I like to see practices of self-care akin to those of personal hygiene. Brushing your teeth isn't the most fun or convenient thing to do, but it's an important habit to maintain for healthy and hygienic reasons. And you get a great smile out of it. So activities such as meditation, journaling, self-reflection, goal setting, proper nutrition, movement practices, exercise, and getting proper rest, all of these are acts of self-care. Some of these things don't sound so bad, or they don't sound much like work at all. But a lot of people struggle with making self-care a priority. It's easy to make time for anything else, but self-care should be a non-negotiable, like taking a shower or brushing your teeth. It's mental hygiene. Here are some tips for practicing self-care. Develop a routine that includes all of your needs for personal hygiene and acts of self-care. Keep small promises to yourself every day, whether it's to drink enough water throughout the day, or to meditate for 5 minutes, or even just to breathe for 5 minutes. That brings me to my next point, which is meditate. First thing in the morning, just get it over with. Your mind is still fresh, and if you get it done first thing in the day, it's done and you're less likely to skip it later on in the day because you've already done it. It's a really important practice to get into, and you can start with as little as 2 minutes if that's where you're at. Exercise. Exercise helps us get rid of all of the stored stress that's being held within our body. Getting enough sleep. 7 to 8 hours is usually what's recommended. Getting enough sunlight, usually about an hour or two per day, just to help get your circadian rhythms going. Journaling as a means of releasing and as a means of reflecting. Proper nutrition, schedule days off for yourself. This is super important as well. Make it a priority. Make sure you have the time to relax. Schedule a massage, a float, and maybe even a nice dinner with yourself. Take yourself out on a nice date. It seems like a lot of work, a lot of time, and maybe even added stress. The caveat to this is self-love. So what is self-love? The term really means something different for each person because we all have many different ways to show that we love ourselves. But figuring out what self-love looks like for you as an individual is super important. Have fun and enjoy finding what ways you most need to love yourself. Here are some suggestions. Practice good self-care. That goes back to all the tips we mentioned earlier. Focus on what you most need for your body, for your mind, and even for your soul, and give it to yourself. Instead of focusing on what you want or what you should be doing, accept and love yourself where you are. Do your best not to compare yourself to other people. Don't compare where you are and you're pursuing your goals or in your life to where someone else is. Your journey is what makes you unique, and it's best to accept this and be your own best friend, be your own coach, be your own biggest fan, and be your own loving and gentle parent when things are difficult. This is self-love. Forgive yourself. That's self-love. It's not always easy to do either. Start doing things on your bucket list. Do something you're really good at, something you enjoy doing, and something that makes you happy. Cook yourself a great meal. Experience nature. And one of my own personal tips, sometimes I like to treat myself to a guilt-free donut. If I've had a long week, guilt-free is what makes it an act of self-love. If I've had a rough week, I'll make sure I spend a Saturday night in a restorative yoga class, followed by a nice float, and then maybe my favorite movie, enjoyed with a bag of chips, or popcorn, or chocolate, or a donut, like I said. Sometimes that's what I need before anything else. And if I don't look after myself, I can't bring myself to anything else that I do. And in turn, everything else ends up suffering. So that's why self-love is such an important practice to keep in mind, and self-care comes along with self-love. All right, so I know many of you are looking for tools for when you're experiencing stress, but your work is to practice these acts of self-care and self-love when you're not stressed. In doing so, it will allow you to become much more resilient when these times of stress occur in your life. All right, I'm Sean. That's been another Nested TV video. Please be sure to comment in the bottom here, subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions regarding any of this content or you want to see videos about any of the practices I mentioned, give us a shout and we'll be sure to do that for you next time. Take care. What are some of these things, geez Louise. Exercise help us get rid of an important